find you. You will regret ever knowing my wife's name.
The notification sound cut through the silence of my garage like a blade. 2:30 a.m., and I was elbow-deep in the engine of Mrs. Patterson's ancient Honda Civic, trying to make sense of why it kept stalling at red lights. The fluorescent light above flickered intermittently, casting dancing shadows across my tools scattered on the workbench. I wiped my greasy hands on my coveralls and grabbed my phone. The message was from Sarah, my wife of 15 years. "I'm at John's house. Come pick me up or we're done." I stared at the screen for a full 30 seconds, letting the words sink in. John Morrison, my best friend since high school. John, who'd been my best man at our wedding. John, whose wife Emma was 7 months pregnant with their second child. My fingers moved across the screen with surprising steadiness. "We're done then." I hit send and immediately took a screenshot of her location sharing. Without hesitation, I forwarded it to Emma Morrison with a simple message. "Thought you should know where your husband is at 2:30 a.m. Nothing gets the blood moving quite like your wife's 2 a.m. booty call from your best friend's house. I set the phone down and walked to the small window overlooking our neighborhood. The streetlights cast long shadows between the houses, and somewhere in the distance, a dog was barking incessantly. Everyone in this town had secrets simmering beneath the surface, but tonight, mine had just boiled over. The signs had been there for months, if I'm being honest. Sarah's late nights at the law firm had become more frequent. Her phone was always face down now, and she'd started taking calls in the other room. There were small things, too. Lipstick on restaurant receipts from places we'd never been together, text notifications that made her jump, and that gold earring I'd found in my truck that definitely wasn't hers. But John? My brain kept circling back to that betrayal. We'd grown up together in this Rust Belt town, watched it slowly decay around us as the factories closed and the young people moved away. While Sarah climbed the ladder at her white shoe law firm, John and I had stayed blue-collar him with his hardware store, me with my auto shop. We'd been the constants in each other's lives, through divorces, ends, and disappointments. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from an unknown number, but I recognized the area code. Emma Morrison. "Hello? Is this Tom?" Her voice was shaking, raw with tears and rage. "Yeah, Emma, I'm sorry you had to find out this way." "How long have you known?" she demanded. "I suspected for about 2 months. Tonight was the first time I had proof." I could hear shouting in the background, John's voice rising above the chaos. Something crashed. Sounded like a lamp, or maybe a picture frame. "That fool!" Emma sobbed. "I'm 7 months pregnant, and he's with your wife." "I know, I'm sorry." Are you really sorry, Tom? Because right now I'm throwing his clothes out the front door, and your wife is standing in my driveway in her fancy lawyer outfit, begging him to go to a hotel with her." I closed my eyes. "Emma, I had no idea it had gone this far." "Well, it has. And now the whole neighborhood is awake watching this circus." Her voice hardened. "I'm going to destroy him, Tom. I'm going to take everything he has." "Get in line," I muttered. After she hung up, I stood in my garage for another hour, staring at the Honda's engine without really seeing it. My phone kept buzzing. Texts from Sarah that I didn't read, missed calls I didn't answer. By sunrise, Emma had made good on her promise to create a spectacle. She'd posted screenshots of my texts on Facebook, along with a lengthy status about cheating husbands and home-wrecking lawyers. The post had been shared 47 times before I even saw it. My daughter Madison, 17 and perpetually dramatic, texted me at 6:15 a.m. "Everyone knows, Dad. Mom says you ruined everything by sending those screenshots. Thanks for making my senior year even worse." I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat at my kitchen table, watching the sun rise over our split-level house in what used to be the good part of town. The mortgage was current, the lawn was mowed, and the shutters were painted a cheerful blue that Sarah had picked out 3 years ago. It looked like the American dream, if you didn't know that the foundation was rotting underneath. My phone rang. John's name appeared on the screen. "You son of a witch," he said without preamble. "You destroyed my marriage." "I destroyed your marriage?" I laughed, and it came out harsh and bitter. "That's rich, John, really rich." Emma threw me out. "She's talking about taking the kids to her mother's in Cleveland." "Maybe you should have thought about that before you started screwing my wife." There was a long pause. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, almost pleading. "Tom, it just happened. We didn't plan this." "Bees. Affairs don't just happen. You made choices, John. You chose to betray me, and now you're dealing with the consequences. We need to talk man to man. No, we don't. We're done talking. We're done being friends. We're done, period. I hung up and immediately blocked his number. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of ignored phone calls and increasingly desperate texts from Sarah. She'd apparently spent the night at her mother's trailer on the other side of town, the same trailer she'd always been embarrassed about, the one she'd made me promise never to mention to her law firm colleagues. Around noon, she finally came home. Sarah looked like she'd aged 5 years overnight. Her usually perfect blonde hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared, and her expensive suit was wrinkled. She stood in our kitchen doorway, like she wasn't sure she had the right to enter. "We need to talk," she said. I didn't look up from my newspaper. "I think you said everything you needed to say at 2:30 this morning." "Tom, please, it's not what you think." "It's not what I think?" I finally looked at her, and she flinched at whatever she saw in my eyes. "What I think is that my wife of 15 years has been having an affair with my best friend. What I think is that you were at his house at 2:30 a.m. while his pregnant wife was home sleeping. What I think is that you are about to try to convince me that this is somehow my fault. I never meant for it to happen, but it did happen. How long?" She sat down across from me, her hands shaking as she reached for the coffee pot. 3 months. 3 months, I nodded slowly. 3 months of lying to my face. 3 months of sneaking around behind my back. 3 months of making me feel crazy for suspecting something was wrong. "You've been distant," she said. And there it was, the blame shifting I'd been expecting. "You work all the time. You never want to go out anymore. You barely talk to me. So, you decided to talk to John instead. With your clothes off." Her face flushed red. "Don't be crude." "Crude? You want to see crude? Let me show you the Facebook comments on Emma's post. Half the town is calling you a home-wrecking slut, and the other half is calling John a cheating fool. That's crude, Sarah. What I'm doing is just stating facts." She started crying then. Those practiced tears that had gotten her out of trouble since she was a child. They used to work on me. Used to make me want to fix whatever was wrong, to be the hero in her story. Not anymore. "The kids know," she sobbed. "Madison won't even look at me. Tyler asked me if we're getting divorced." "Are we?" The question hung in the air between us like smoke. She wiped her nose with a tissue and looked at me with red, swollen eyes. "I don't know. I don't know anything anymore." "Well, let me help clarify things for you. You made a choice, Sarah. You chose John over our marriage. You chose 3 months of sneaking around over 15 years of building something together. You chose to humiliate me in front of our entire community. I made a mistake. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk on the way home. A mistake is double booking dinner plans. An affair is a series of deliberate choices, and you made every single one of them." She was quiet for a long time, staring down at her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to leave. This is my house too." "Then I'll leave. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend that we can just go back to normal. I'm not going to smile and nod while you figure out whether you want to be married to me or run off with John. John's not. We're not. Emma kicked him out. He's staying at the Motel 6 by the highway." I laughed, and it was a sound devoid of any humor. "The Motel 6, how romantic. Is that where you two have been meeting? Room 237 with the broken air conditioner and the stain on the carpet? Stop it. Why? Does the truth hurt? Does it bother you that your great love affair has been reduced to hourly rates and scratchy sheets?" She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the linoleum floor. "I can't do this right now. I can't deal with your anger and sarcasm." "Then don't. Go back to your mother's trailer. Go to the Motel 6. Go wherever you want. Just go." After she left, I sat in my kitchen for another hour, listening to the house settle around me. 15 years of marriage, and it had all come down to a 2:30 a.m. text message and a screenshot sent in anger. My phone buzzed, a text from my boxing coach Ray at the gym downtown. "Heard about the drama? Come hit something instead of sitting there feeling sorry for yourself." Ray's boxing gym was a relic from the town's better days, wedged between a defunct factory and a check-cashing place. The equipment was old. The building smelled like sweat and leather, and the clientele was mostly middle-aged men working through their own versions of disappointment. It was exactly what I needed. I spent 2 hours pounding the heavy bag, working out 15 years of accumulated frustration on the cracked leather. Ray, a former Golden Gloves champion who'd never quite made it pro, watched me work with the calculating eye of someone who'd seen plenty of men try to punch their way through heartbreak. "You're dropping your left," he said finally. "I'm not here for technique advice." "No, you're here because your wife's been screwing your best friend, and you want to hit something that won't hit back." I stopped punching and turned to look at him. Ray was in his 60s, gray-haired and scarred, with the kind of weathered face that came from taking too many hits and not enough breaks. "Emma Morrison posted it all over Facebook," he continued. "Whole town's talking about it." "Great. You want some advice?" "Not particularly. I'm going to give it to you anyway. Don't let them win. Don't let them turn you into the bitter, angry ex-husband who couldn't handle his wife leaving, hit back, but hit back smart, not stupid." "What's that supposed to mean?" Ray walked over to the water cooler and filled 2 paper cups. He handed me one and leaned against the wall. "Means you got 2 choices here, Tom. You can let this destroy you, or you can use it to build something better. But if you're going to fight backs, you better make sure you win." I drank the water and thought about his words. Ray was right about one thing. I had choices to make. The question was whether I had the stomach to make the hard ones. Within a week, the scandal had infected every corner of our small town like a virus. People I'd known for decades suddenly found reasons to avoid eye contact at the grocery store. My auto shop, which had been steady if not spectacular, started losing customers. Apparently, people love a good scandal more than they love a reliable tune-up. Mrs. Henderson, who'd been bringing her car to me for 8 years, called to cancel her appointment. "I'm sorry, Tom, but with everything that's going on, well, Harold thinks it might be best if we take our business elsewhere." "What does my marriage have to do with fixing your transmission?" "It's just complicated right now." Complicated. That seemed to be everyone's favorite word when they wanted to abandon ship without taking responsibility for it. The worst part wasn't the lost business or the whispered conversations that stopped when I entered a room. The worst part was watching my kids navigate the wreckage of their parents' marriage in the most public way possible. Madison, my 17-year-old, had always been popular at school. Homecoming court, honor society. The kind of kid who seemed to glide through adolescence without the usual drama. Now she was the girl whose mother was having an affair, whose father had aired the family's dirty laundry on social media for the whole town to dissect. "Everyone's talking about it," she told me one evening, sitting at the kitchen table with her homework spread out in front of her. Jenny Morrison won't even look at me in the hallway. Jenny was John and Emma's 15-year-old daughter, Madison's friend since elementary school. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I know this is hard." "Why did you have to send those screenshots to Mrs. Morrison? Why couldn't you just handle it privately?" It was a fair question, one I'd been asking myself for days. Because I was angry, and I wanted them to face consequences for what they'd done. Well, congratulations. Now we're all facing consequences. Tyler, my 14-year-old son, had gone in the opposite direction. Where Madison was hurt and confused, Tyler was angry. He'd gotten into a fight at school when someone made a comment about his mother, earning himself a 3-day suspension and a black eye. "Kid had it coming," he told me when I picked him up from the principal's office. "Fighting doesn't solve anything, Tyler. Neither does letting people walk all over you." Out of the mouths of babes. Sarah had been staying at her mother's trailer, coming by the house only to get clothes or spend time with the kids. We'd spoken twice since that morning in the kitchen, both conversations brief and businesslike. She wanted to work things out. I wanted her to admit that what she'd done was unforgivable. We were at an impasse. John, meanwhile, had been making the rounds, trying to salvage his reputation and his marriage. He'd shown up at Emma's sister's house with flowers, been turned away from the school when he tried to pick up his kids, and according to town gossip, had been sleeping in his car some nights because the Motel 6 was too expensive for extended stays. I might have felt sorry for him if I hadn't hated him so completely. The confrontation I'd been both dreading and anticipating finally happened on a Thursday afternoon. I was at Morrison Hardware, of all places, picking up some supplies for a job. I'd forgotten that John owned the place, or maybe I'd subconsciously wanted the confrontation. Either way, there I was in aisle 3, looking at socket wrenches, when John appeared at the end of the row. He looked terrible. His usually neat appearance had gone to hell, unshaven, wrinkled clothes, the kind of hollow-eyed exhaustion that comes from not sleeping for days. John, we stood there for a moment, 2 middle-aged men in a hardware store. 15 years of friendship reduced to awkward silence and barely contained hostility. "We need to talk," he said finally. "No, we don't. Please, just give me 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I followed him to the loading dock behind the store. It was private back there, just the two of us and a pile of lumber that needed to be moved inside. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know that I'm sorry." "You're sorry you got caught." "No, I'm sorry it happened. I'm sorry I betrayed you. I'm sorry I destroyed my marriage and hurt my kids and ruined everything. But you're not sorry you slept with my wife." He was quiet for a long moment, and I had my answer. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," he said finally. "How was it supposed to happen? You were going to leave Emma and the kids, Sarah was going to divorce me, and you two were going to ride off into the sunset together? I don't know. We never talked about the future." "Of course you didn't, because that would have required you to think about the consequences of what you were doing." The conversation deteriorated from there. 15 years of friendship don't die quietly. They go out with shouting and accusations and all the cruel truths that people usually keep to themselves. "You want to know the truth?" John said, his voice rising. "Sarah came to me. She was lonely and unhappy, and you were too busy feeling sorry for yourself to notice. So you decided to fix her loneliness by sleeping with her. She needed someone to talk to, someone who would listen to her. And somehow that led to the Motel 6. You don't understand. You never understood her. She's ambitious. She's smart. She wants more than this dying town can offer. And you can offer her more? You, who's been running the same hardware store for 20 years and can barely afford to keep the lights on?" That hit home. John's face flushed red, and he took a step toward me. At least I paid attention to her. At least I made her feel like she mattered. By screwing her behind my back. By being there when you weren't. I don't remember deciding to punch him. One moment we were shouting at each other, and the next, my hand was connecting with his face in a slap that echoed off the concrete walls of the loading dock. John stumbled backward, more from surprise than force, and I grabbed his phone from his hand and threw it against the wall. It shattered into pieces, the screen going dark. "Stay away from my wife," I said. "Stay away from my family. And if I see you anywhere near my shop or my house, we're going to have a much more serious conversation." I left him there, rubbing his cheek and staring at the remains of his phone. The security cameras had probably recorded the whole thing, but I was past caring about consequences. That night, Sarah called. "John told me what happened at the hardware store." Good for John. "You can't keep acting like this, Tom. You can't keep lashing out at everyone." "I can do whatever I want, Sarah. That's the beauty of not having to worry about what my wife thinks anymore." "We're still married." "Are we? Because last I checked, married people don't spend their nights at other people's houses." "I want to come home." The words hung in the air between us, loaded with implications and conditions and all the things she wasn't saying. "What about John?" "It's over. It was a mistake and it's over." "Just like that?" "Just like that." I thought about it for a long moment, weighing forgiveness against pride, love against betrayal. "No," I said finally. "No? No, you can't come home. No, I don't forgive you. No, we can't just pretend this didn't happen." She was quiet for so long, I thought she'd hung up. "What do you want from me?" she asked finally. "I want you to understand that actions have consequences. I want you to stop acting like you're the sufferer here, and I want you to leave me alone while I figure out how to rebuild my life." "Tom." "I'm done, Sarah. We're done." This time I was the one who hung up. 2 weeks later, I was nursing a beer at the Rusty Anchor when Lisa Chen walked in. Lisa owned Chen's Building Supply, Morrison Hardware's biggest competitor, and she had a reputation for being ruthless in business and personal relationships alike. She was also, according to town gossip, the reason John's hardware store was struggling financially. "Tom Mitchell," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "Mind if I join you? Free country." Lisa was in her early 40s, attractive in a sharp-edged way that suggested she'd fought for everything she'd ever gotten. She ordered a whiskey neat and studied me with calculating eyes. "Heard you've been having some troubles lately." "You could say that." "Heard John Morrison's been having some troubles too." I took a sip of my beer and waited. Lisa didn't strike me as the type to make small talk without an agenda. "You know," she continued, "it's interesting how quickly a man's reputation can crumble when people start questioning his character." "Is it?" Oh, yes, take John, for example. Used to be considered a pillar of the community. Honest businessman, devoted family man, reliable friend. Now people are wondering what else he might have lied about. What are you getting at, Lisa? She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. I'm getting at the fact that John Morrison has been cooking his books for the past 2 years. Inflating inventory, hiding debt, falsifying loan applications. The only reason Morrison Hardware is still open is because he's been juggling creditors like a circus performer. I set down my beer and looked at her more carefully. How do you know that? Because I've been trying to buy him out for 3 years. I've seen his financial records. I know exactly how deep in the hole he is. And you're telling me this because I think we might be able to help each other. Lisa reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope. She slid it across the table to me. What's this? Copies of loan applications John filed with 3 different banks. Applications where your wife co-signed using forged signatures. I opened the envelope and scanned the documents. There was Sarah's signature on bank forms, loan agreements, and financial statements. The handwriting looked right, but something about it seemed off. She didn't sign these, I said. No, she didn't. But she did give John access to your joint accounts. She did help him move money around to make his books look better. And she did use her position at the law firm to help him restructure some very questionable debts. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Sarah hadn't just been having an affair, she'd been helping John commit fraud. Why are you showing me this? Because John Morrison destroyed your marriage, and he's been destroying this town's economy for years because your wife helped him do it, and now they both need to face the consequences. What do you want from me? Lisa smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. I want you to help me make sure those consequences are comprehensive. We talked for another hour, and by the time I left the Rusty Anchor, I had a new understanding of just how deep the betrayal went. Sarah and John hadn't just been sleeping together. They'd been partners in a scheme to keep his failing business afloat using fraudulent loans and creative accounting. The next morning, I called my lawyer. Tom, I have to advise you that if what you're telling me is true, your wife could be facing serious criminal charges. I understand that. And you want to proceed anyway? I want to proceed because of that. Within 48 hours, I had copies of all our joint financial records, documentation of every transaction Sarah had made without my knowledge, and a clear picture of how she'd used our marriage to facilitate John's fraud. I also had a plan. The first step was simple. I emptied our joint accounts and canceled all the credit cards. Sarah found out when her card was declined at the grocery store. She called me furious and panicked. What did you do? I protected my assets. You can't just take all our money. It's not our money anymore, Sarah. It's my money. Our money stopped existing when you decided to forge my signature on loan documents. Silence. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you do. Morrison Hardware, 3 different banks, falsified financial statements. Ring any bells? Tom, I can explain. No, you can't. Because there's no explanation that makes this okay. There's no version of this story where you're the sufferer. I was trying to help a friend. You were committing fraud. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. And now you're going to deal with the consequences. I hung up and immediately called Lisa. It's done, I said. She knows we know. Good. Phase 2 starts tomorrow. Phase 2 was public humiliation on a scale that made Emma Morrison's Facebook post look like a gentle suggestion. Lisa had connections throughout the business community, and she used every one of them to spread word about John's financial irregularities and Sarah's involvement. By the end of the week, John's creditors were calling in their loans, Sarah's law firm was conducting an internal investigation, and half the town was speculating about what other secrets might come to light. The other half was taking sides. And unfortunately for John and Sarah, most people sided with the betrayed husband and the pregnant woman who'd been abandoned for a lawyer. You're enjoying this, Madison accused me one evening. You're enjoying watching Mom suffer. Your mother made her choices. Now she's living with them. She made a mistake. She made dozens of mistakes over and over again for months, and then she compounded those mistakes by helping John commit fraud. I don't understand any of this. I don't understand how everything fell apart so fast. I looked at my daughter, 17 years old, honor roll student, college-bound, and trying to make sense of how her parents had become strangers to each other in the space of a few weeks. Sometimes people aren't who you think they are, I said. Sometimes the people you trust most are the ones who hurt you worst. Is that what happened with you and Mom? Yeah, sweetheart. That's exactly what happened. The final confrontation came on a rainy Thursday night in October. John had managed to secure financing for a new store across town, somehow convincing investors that his previous failures were just bad luck and poor timing. The grand opening was scheduled for the following week. Lisa called me at home. He's at the new store tonight doing inventory with Sarah. Thought you might want to know. Why would I want to know that? Because this is your last chance to make them understand what they've cost you. I thought about it for exactly 30 seconds. Then I grabbed my coat and car keys. The new store was in a strip mall on the edge of town, squeezed between a dollar store and a vacant restaurant that had been closed for 2 years. John's truck was in the parking lot, along with Sarah's Honda. Through the windows, I could see them working together, unpacking boxes and arranging merchandise. They looked comfortable together, like a team, like partners, like people who had betrayed me and were now trying to build something new on the ashes of what they'd destroyed. I sat in my truck for 10 minutes, rain drumming on the roof, watching them work. They were laughing about something, Sarah's head thrown back in genuine amusement. I hadn't seen her laugh like that in years. Finally, I got out of the truck and walked to the front door. It was unlocked. "We're closed," John called out without looking up from the box he was unpacking. "I'm not here to shop." Both of them turned toward me. Sarah went pale, and John's face hardened into something resembling resolve. "Tom," Sarah said, "what are you doing here? I wanted to see what 15 years of marriage and 20 years of friendship had bought me." I walked slowly down the main aisle, taking in the neat rows of tools and hardware, the fresh paint on the walls, the bright fluorescent lights that made everything look clean and new. "Nice place," I said. "Very impressive. How much did it cost?" "Tom, you need to leave," John said. "Do I? This is a public business, isn't it? At least it will be next week." "We don't want any trouble." "Trouble?" I laughed, and the sound echoed off the empty walls. "You think I'm here to cause trouble? John, you slept with my wife. Sarah, you helped him commit fraud using my name and my money. You two have already caused all the trouble there is to cause." Sarah stepped forward, her hands raised in a placating gesture. "Tom, please, we can work this out. We can all move past this." "Move past this? How exactly do you suggest we do that? Should I just pretend that my wife didn't spend 3 months sneaking around behind my back? Should I pretend that my best friend didn't forge my signature on loan documents? Should I just smile and wave and wish you both well in your new life together?" "It doesn't have to be like this," she said. "It absolutely has to be like this. Because this is what consequences look like, Sarah. This is what happens when you make the choices you made." John moved closer, trying to put himself between Sarah and me. "You need to calm down." "I am calm. I'm perfectly calm. In fact, I've never been calmer in my life." I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a manila envelope, similar to the one Lisa had given me weeks earlier. "You know what this is?" Neither of them answered. "These are copies of every forged document, every fraudulent loan application, every illegal transaction you two have been involved in for the past year. I've already given copies to the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division, the State Attorney General's office, and 3 different banks." Sarah's face went white. "Tom, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly. I understand that you're both criminals. I understand that you destroyed my family to cover up your crimes. And I understand that you thought you were going to get away with it." John stepped forward, his hands clenched into fists. "You son of a witch. You're going to destroy us." "No, John. You destroyed yourselves. I'm just making sure everyone knows about it." What happened next was inevitable, I suppose. 20 years of friendship and 15 years of marriage don't die quietly. They go out with violence and screaming and all the ugly truths that people usually keep buried. John swung at me, a wild haymaker that I saw coming from a mile away. I ducked under it and drove my shoulder into his midsection, sending him stumbling backward into a display of paint cans. The cans scattered across the floor, some of them popping open and spilling their contents across the pristine linoleum. John slipped in the mess and went down hard, his head cracking against the concrete floor. Sarah screamed and ran toward him, but I caught her arm and spun her around to face me. "This is what betrayal looks like," I said. "This is what it costs." I let go of her and walked to the electrical panel on the back wall. With a few quick motions, I shut off the main breaker, plunging the store into darkness except for the emergency lighting. Then I walked to the water main and opened every valve I could find. Water began flooding the store, mixing with the spilled paint, to create a toxic mess that would take weeks to clean up and thousands of dollars to repair. "Tom, stop!" Sarah screamed. "You're destroying everything." "Good," I said. "Now you know how it feels." I walked back toward the front of the store, my footsteps echoing in the darkness. John was trying to get to his feet, slipping and sliding in the paint and water, cursing me with every breath. At the front door, I turned back to look at them one last time. My wife and my former best friend, standing in the wreckage of their new beginning, covered in paint and water and the consequences of their choices. "Enjoy cleaning up your mess," I said. "It's going to take a long time." I walked out into the rain and got in my truck. Behind me, I could hear Sarah calling my name, begging me to come back, to help them, to fix what I'd broken. I drove away without looking back. The next morning, I called Lisa from the airport. "It's done," I said. "All of it? All of it. The store is flooded, John's in the hospital with a concussion, and Sarah's probably going to be arrested within the week." "And you?" "I'm going to Thailand. I hear it's nice this time of year." I boarded the plane with a single suitcase and a smile that felt foreign on my face after months of anger and betrayal. Below me, the town that had been my home for 40 years grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared entirely. Somewhere down there, Sarah was probably trying to explain to her law firm partners how she'd gotten involved in a fraud scheme. Somewhere down there, John was probably wondering how he was going to pay for the damage to his store without insurance coverage for intentional acts. Somewhere down there, the people who had called me a sufferer were probably starting to realize that they'd been wrong. I wasn't a sufferer. I was something much more dangerous. I was a man who had nothing left to lose, and everything to gain by watching his enemies destroy themselves. As the plane climbed into the clouds, I opened a book and began planning the rest of my life. A life without betrayal, without lies, and without the people who had tried to make me into someone I wasn't. They had called me a villain. They were right, and I had left them all in the ashes of their own making, smiling all the way to my new beginning.